Joining me now, National Editor at The Australian, Dennis Shanahan. Great to have you accompany us, Dennis. We'll start with question time. The opposition today absolutely focused not on Qantas upgrades, but on cost of living. Have a listen.
This Labor government is damaging the economy and keeping interest rates higher for longer, which is hurting families. When will the reckless spending stop?
Is Australia in a household recession? A household recession is a technically defined term, and we would expect a yes or no answer.
The question is to the Prime Minister. For how many months have Australians suffered under Labor's household recession?
I know, Dennis, some people who love the squawking and the fighting that goes on in the theatre of question time might have hoped that the upgrades would lead off the week. But given we've got an RBA meeting tomorrow, and given that upgrades won't change votes, but economic circumstances in households will, I can understand why their focus was where it was today. What did you think?
Oh yes, look, it has always been about the economy, about the pressure on households, cost of living. And at some stage, Peter Dutton had to shift. He's been very patient. He's used various political scandals to actually damage the government, but now he is switching to the economy. At the same time, the government wants to talk about the economy, wants to talk about anything else but Qantas upgrades. But what is happening here is the two leaders have committed to probably the longest election campaign in history in Australia. We are now going to be campaigning all the way through to next year. And Peter Dutton has turned to the economy, but not just the economy, he's turned to the household economy, to kitchen economics. He's talking about the price pressures on families, not the inflation figure. And so what we're seeing here is a very narrow cast approach from Peter Dutton, aiming at outer suburban areas of Australia where the cost of living is still felt most. And that's where he can shift votes in a big way come the election.
We know he's hurting on the upgrades fiasco. It all goes to his character, and it's a cumulative effect. You know, it's the fancy house, it's the love of the freebie, then it's the upgrades on personal travel while he was the regulating minister. All of those in aggregate make it, I guess, less likely he can campaign on being the bloke from the Housing Commission flats anymore. Those days are gone. But just in terms of election timing, I listened to that rally yesterday. It took me back to 2013. Remember when Julia Gillard announced at the start of the year the date of the election. Now, that was to stave off Kevin Rudd. It didn't work, of course. He took her out in 2013 and went to the election and lost. But it felt to me like the Prime Minister has got some cranky troops on his backbench. He's got to get on to the political war footing of a campaign to get the focus back to where Labor wants it, and away, I guess, from what's been a pretty poor performance for at least 2 years on governing.
Indeed, and I think the Prime Minister, I mean, it looked like an election launch on Sunday. It looked like a rally, and all of the cash splash, it's all about an election campaign. We are seeing all sorts of messages going out on social media, people being contacted by Labor. The Prime Minister is behaving as if the election campaign has already begun. The reason he's doing that is because he has to try and recapture momentum. We saw last year when he lost momentum over the referendum, he had to go into a mini mid-term election campaign. He's doing the same now. He's trying to draw and lock in critics within the party, saying, well, we've got a campaign going now. And so he is trying to get people to be disciplined. And of course, Peter Dutton's been doing the same thing for quite some time, saying be ready for an election here or now. Well, of course, I think that we know as of today, there is no election in 2024, which is something which I've always said. I know you've had a different view, but we are now looking at an election possibly in March and certainly in May. But what we've got is an empty agenda in the Parliament for the next 3 weeks and possibly for the next 4 or 5 weeks at the beginning of next year, because the government has gone into election mode, it's given up legislative mode, and it is just saying, think of the second term agenda. It was extraordinary. The Prime Minister today in Parliament talking about what they were going to do in their second term agenda when there is still 5 to 6 months of Parliament to run in theory. So I think that this is a clear sign the government has nothing else to do but campaign politically.